excited to dive in and explore how nonprofits can strengthen and diversify their revenue streams. We know this is a hot topic for really any nonprofit. I'm thinking about how are we going to fundraise, trying times, all of the kind of hot words that you can say here, but it is real, and we know that, and we know that you feel that. I do have a few housekeeping things before we get started with the content. If you drop your email in the chat, you'll receive several follow-ups, including a recording, the slides, some resources, our ebook, and then we also have a special demo offer for all of you from Boardable as well after the webinar. The recording will also be kept on LinkedIn, so you can revisit this at any time. And then just keep an eye on your inbox for a quick feedback survey after the session as well. So that's all of my things. I'm really excited to introduce Kristi Howard-Schultz. She has 25 years of nonprofit leadership. She's truly an expert in fundraising, board development, and strategy. She's really known for taking kind of these really bold ideas and turning them into tactical and actionable plans. And so I think that's so important, not just being able to have the high level inspiration, but also the how are we going to get this done? So I'm excited for Kristi and her colleague, Sarah Grimm, to really present this great information to you today. So look forward to kind of catching up at the end of the webinar with a few closing reminders. But otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to these amazing experts. And Kristi, I'll let you introduce Sarah with anything else and go ahead and get started.
Yeah, we're excited to be with you today. And thanks to Jenny and her colleagues for hosting us. So Sarah and I have had the pleasure of working together for quite a while now, on and off. We originally met when she was our first client as an executive director of a local Boys and Girls Club, and then later came and joined our team. So she and I both share a passion for fundraising, but have also been program directors and executive directors. So kind of come at this from a different perspective where we want to be really inclusive of the whole team in fundraising. So we will get started. Just a tiny bit about us. KHS Consulting has been around. We're actually in year 8. And so we serve about 30 clients a year across the Midwest. Our team has grown a little bit. So we have a team of 6, but we do grants management, strategic planning, fractional staffing, some capital campaigns, and just facilitation in general. So we're excited to be with you today. We are going to share real plans that we have done and also the results from our clients of how they've worked. And then at the very end of the deck, you will see and have all of the resources that we reference to create these materials. So, and then I'll hand it over to Sarah.
All right, so you just learned a little bit about us in KHS, and now we want to learn all about you. So in the chat, if everybody could please drop in your organization, your role with your organization, and where you're located. Don't be shy.
This is our first LinkedIn Live as well, so.
All right, so I think we are having some technical issues with the chat, so we're just going to keep rolling. Let's talk outcomes. So what are you going to get from this webinar today? After attending this webinar, you are going to be able to rethink your donor engagement through the lens of the donor life cycle. You're going to gain tools to activate your board, and we're going to be accessing and strengthening your fundraising mix. You might be wondering, what is the donor life cycle? So I like to think of the donor life cycle as a plant or as a seed. First, you plant the seed. That's the identification process. Then you're going to cultivate your seed. You have to water it. You have to fertilize it. And so that's moving your identified prospects to the next stage and getting them ready to make the ask of solicitation. That third solicitation stage from my seed analogy is, oh, we have a tomato. You're harvesting your crops or whatever your said seed produced. So that's the solicitation phase. You're asking for a specific gift for a specific amount toward a specific cause. And then you can't just give up on your said plant. You have to continue to water it, to cultivate it. And so that's the stewardship phase. You're updating your donor or your seed. You're thanking them for their donation. You're recognizing them. And you're keeping them updated on the impact that their gift actually made. And it doesn't stop there. Let's try in the chat. We'll take a quick poll. Where in the donor life cycle do you spend the most time? Is it in the identification process, the cultivation process, the solicitation process, or the stewardship process?
And I see we have a variety of roles represented here in the LinkedIn Live. So we have VPs of finance, we have directors of development, we have marketing folks, we have executive directors. And so probably to a certain extent, depending on your role, you're spending a different amount of time in various parts of the donor life cycle. Yeah.
Okay. There seems to be a delay in the chat. So to answer my question, stewardship is where you want to spend the most time, about 4 times the amount in stewardship and cultivation than in any other group. So
I love seeing these answers when folks are getting to spend the most of their time in stewardship and cultivation. That is definitely what we want to see, as Sarah said. It's not uncommon that we spend most of our time in solicitation itself. So in this next section, we're going to talk about practical strategies to bring your donors through every phase of the donor life cycle and how to kind of step up your game in each of those sections. So obviously, identification is just simply the act of identifying, right? And so how are you finding your new donors currently? And as Sarah said, there's a little bit of a delay, but sometimes we're finding our new donors from events, perhaps through peer-to-peer fundraising. I see there are a lot of educational institutions represented on the call today. Walks or runs. No matter how you're finding them, obviously the intersection of where people have capacity but also are engaged is the sweet spot, right? So that's what we really want to focus on. So one strategy that we've used with clients that's been very successful is to really work to brainstorm who else we could reach, who should we be talking to that we're not talking to. And so in the next example that we're going to share, any organization that we work with that serves a large geographic area, whether that's statewide or multiple counties in one state or multiple states, we kind of have looked at what are all the foundations in their area, and then simply written a note to invite them to connect. So not a solicitation, not a grant application, but an actual invitation. And so in this example, we share a little bit about ourselves, but mostly we're asking, we would love to meet with you and learn about your giving priorities and your donors' priorities. For example, if it's a community foundation, right? And would you like to come and have a tour? Would you like to meet some of our constituents, our beneficiaries? And so in this case, again, where we have organizations that serve multiple counties or a large geographic area, we create a density map so that there's a great visual to share with the foundation, as well as a short infographic to demonstrate the impact and the reach of who we are serving in their area. Try to entice them to learn more. And so when we've done this, we've seen multiple responses, even in the first week when we do this as a mailing. We recently had a client that had 4 meetings scheduled in the first week and $11,000 in unsolicited gifts, because again, this is not a solicitation. This is just an invitation. We had an estate gift that we don't know the amount yet. We're very excited, but it's pending as it goes through the estate process. And then multiple meetings and tours scheduled. We've had invitations to apply for formal funding as a result of this. And then above and beyond all, and this is true of everything that we're going to share today, we really want all of your content to work harder, smarter, not harder. And so we've also used these materials with clients to repurpose them for future campaigns, piece by piece, to use them as collateral in grant submissions and in board recruitment and so much more. And so how can you make that effort of making these materials go as far as possible? And then in cultivation, obviously in this phase, we just want to foster the growth, encourage. So Sarah shared a gardening analogy, I think in this part about training the vine, like where do we want the donors to go? What's their journey look like? What do we want that to look like? So in this case, with the strategy that we've used is the strategy of the classic strategy. If you've been in fundraising for a really long time, ask for advice, get money, ask for money, get advice. So surveying our donors, which is something that's very simple and often overlooked. It doesn't cost a lot or take a lot of time, but basically we updated our stakeholder map before we did the survey. And that was very powerful because we reached totally new audiences. And then the survey invited people to contact us and see if we wanted to meet. And so we had a lot of meaningful conversations that were able to bring the stories to light of what this organization was doing. And we transformed these stories then into a powerful infographic that then accompanied the survey where we further cultivated this community. So you probably have some stakeholder mapping. Perhaps it's time to update it. That can really help you uncover new donors, right? And cultivate lapsed donors. So in this case, this is sort of what it looked like for us. We asked for a lot of advice. How do you like to use the park that you're visiting? And then we shared what we learned that people may not be aware of, right? The partnering organizations, that this isn't just a conservancy, that the university hosts things there, that the local Boys and Girls Club hosts a camp there. And then as a result of that, we had a 72% increase in participation from the previous survey. We had a 6% increase in our mailing list. So again, the ability to cultivate even more from there. And then we also had 28 individuals come forward. In this case, one of the things we were investigating through the survey was your interest in making a major gift or a named gift for a facility. We had 28 new people come forward to do that just from this survey. So then solicitation, I saw most people write that solicitation is where they're spending the most time. Again, this is not uncommon, but this is where we're trying to create urgency for the donor. So we're petitioning them, we're requesting that specific amount. And so what does good solicitation look like? So in this case, we have implemented segmentation, which again, if you're a one-person shop, that can seem really overwhelming. You could start with just 2 segments: lapsed donors, returning donors, volunteers, donors. It doesn't have to be super complicated. It can obviously be very sophisticated depending on your staff size and your database capability. So in this case, we segmented volunteers as well as folks who had never donated. Volunteers had not yet been invited to donate in this example, as well as we created a major or stretch gift segment. So people that knew us intimately, but we wanted them to be invited and included to provide more support. And just through that simple segmentation, we saw some really great results. So if you aren't including volunteers, we want to be sure that you are including them. And so I have been a part of a lot of organizations that we say no for the volunteer because we say things like, well, they're already volunteering their time, so we don't want to overburden them. But saying no for your volunteers is a costly mistake because your volunteers are your most invested constituents. Fidelity Charitable did a study where they found that volunteers are 4 times more likely to give than a non-volunteer. And over their lifetime, they give 10 times on average what a non-volunteer does. So you absolutely want to not only include them, but speak to them specifically. Let them know that you are talking to them, that you have noticed them. So when you do your giving ladder, some things you might want to keep in mind, and this is from a study at DePaul University, that new and never donors, these low-level gifts, and this might be a no-brainer for long-time fundraisers, but those low-level gifts are good giving levels for them: $25, $50, $100. You typically retain about 50% of the donors who give below $25, about 65% of people who give that $100 to $249 mark, and $100 is the most common gift amount still to this day. That's one thing in fundraising that isn't really changing. But if you can get constituents to invest a bit more, obviously the more they give, the greater the retention is. And so again, that could be a no-brainer, but how do we do that? So we typically retain about 75% of those donors that give above $1,000. And obviously, we're all working on this. About 80% of people that make a monthly gift are retained. So when we're doing our giving levels, how can we tell the difference to our donors? The outcomes and the outputs. We have the head people and the heart people, the people that want to know the hard data and the people that want to hear the stories. Well, our giving levels are a way to do that, right? They can actually demonstrate both. How can we test our giving levels and tie it to that average gift amount, that $100 gift amount? How can we test consumer data? So I know that opinions widely vary on this, but I think every once in a while it is good to see how fundraising relates to general consumer data. So, rounded off numbers are not as popular perhaps as exact numbers. Exact numbers can be more believable. So if you're trying to move people to that $1,000 level to entice the retention and increase their involvement, their engagement, what story can you tell that's near $1,000, but very precise to hook people into that new level? Thinking through your giving levels, you might also think about how can you show the full spectrum of the services that you offer or the experience that someone has, start to finish. So from the time a volunteer does all that boring stuff, like fills out their paperwork, gets a background check, to the time that they deliver a life-changing experience to a child that they mentor, right? If you are segmenting, how can you tell the right story to that specific audience? So the story that you tell to a volunteer might be different than the story that you tell to a new donor, right? And then how can you use the high end of your giving levels to promote a major gift or special campaign? So an anniversary that you're going through, a new campaign that you're entering, a milestone event. And then we just want to encourage you that your giving levels are actually, when you use them correctly, they are one of your best methods of telling your story. And they are a wonderful way to cultivate your donors. So there is a wonderful reference at the end of the deck about the science of the giving ladder. So again, this is a study from a friendly software company, OneCause, where they looked at databases and how you can use the giving ladder to cultivate donors, right? So in our general segment, or for people who have never gifted us anything, we want to have those low levels, right? So $25 might cover a box of batteries, or facilitate a listening and spoken language session, or offer an intervention session. You want to go low to high for people who have never donated. For people who have donated, you want to go high to low. You want to start their expectation with, like, we'd love for you to give as much as you can, right? And so you might tell a different story here. What $1,000 does, all the way down to, you can see in this example, using some of those precise numbers. So again, that $100 mark, in this campaign, we were focusing on moving more people over the $100 threshold to experiment. And so when we've done this, we've seen a 27% increase in annual giving, or up to 100 new donors. We recently had a client who did this, and they had they recaptured close to 20% of the donors that had lapsed from the previous year, just by re-engaging them with a lapsed donor segment where the giving ladder was tied to those specific donors. And then in stewardship, this is my favorite definition of stewardship: the careful and responsible management of something. So I like to think about that, because when we aren't allowed to spend time in stewardship, we're sort of being irresponsible with the resources that we already have. And I know I'm preaching to the choir on this call, but that's just my encouragement. So when you share this deck with your leadership team. So you can never spend too much time in stewardship is the short of it. So in this case, we're going to show an example where we did a new donor welcome kit. And I use that in quotations because this is not about offering a gift to someone. This isn't a tchotchke. This isn't anything like that. This is, yeah, you get your receipt. You get that online. That's a receipt. That's a transaction. That's just like when I go to CVS and they print me that long, terrible thing that I walk out with, right? That's something we have to do. The acknowledgement is a little bit more warm than the receipt, right? A little bit more specific than the receipt. Then we're talking about the kit being an actual welcome letter, which we're going to show you. So within the month, maybe this one is signed by the director of annual giving or your director of development if you have a small organization, right? And then within 90 days, sending a very, very special note, a postcard that has photographs, again, appropriate to your audience and that protects vulnerable identities when needing to. But within that 90-day mark, right? We know that if we can capture a donor's attention in those first 90 days, that they are retained and more likely to make that second gift. That's a very important mark in time in the donor journey. And you'll see here in this example that we share that we're varying the voice. So maybe one is signed by the executive director, maybe one is signed by the director of development, and then one is signed by a volunteer. This is also a wonderful softball way to involve your board in fundraising. This is an introduction. It's not scary. It's not intimidating. They don't have to make a phone call. They don't have to ask anyone for money. It raises their awareness. It gives those heart moments, right? Where they can see the impact of the gifts, right? So in this case, we're sharing an example where the new donors did come from an event. So thank you for attending our gala, right? We're so glad that you were there. This is what your gift does. Your decision to give is significant. Your gift helps us serve more families and serve them better. 75% of children with visual impairment have more than one disability. 85% of the foundation of our learning happens in the first 5 years of our life. And 90% of what a child learns is through their vision. 100% of families benefit when you give. So this is clearly from an example that we're sharing from a visually impaired preschool service. And so then we share our postcard. And what did your first gift do? I hope the chat isn't covering up some of these things, but I'll share with you what the first gift does, right? So again, this is just a thank you. We're so happy you're here. You're a part of our family. Your first gift enabled a child to get their first pair of glasses. It helped a baby look into their mother's eyes for the first time. It helped our families meet the first other family that was just like them. So, and we are going to take questions at the end, so I promise to get to some of these. I like these questions. These are really good. So when we've made an effort, and again, this is one thing we want to focus on is what are some of the smallest things you can do to make the biggest difference? So this is a great one because you can print, run a report, see how many people were new givers last year, just print all of those postcards day one of the next year, right? You can have it ready to go. When we've done this with clients, we've seen annual giving revenue increase by 16%, leadership giving increase by 17%, or I'm sorry, annual donors increased by 17%, leadership giving increased by 20%, and we've seen retention move as far as from the 30s to the 60s in just 1 year's time from this singular effort. And so what we want to think about is, and I'm going to hand it off to Sarah after this, is my friend and fellow colleague TJ constantly says, engagement begets investment. So engagement equals more investment, more engagement, more investment. So how can we best engage our donors through every phase of the donor life cycle? And that's what we really want you to be able to take home today. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah, and then we're going to get into how you can engage your board and staff a little bit further in helping you in diversifying your revenue.
Great. Thanks, Kristi. All right, let's talk about our donor life cycle as we're identifying and bringing them through the cycle. First, when we're identifying, it's kind of the prospect phase. We discussed this earlier in the webinar, but we really want to think about who is untapped, who are our untapped resources. And a lot of them are right there. I would suggest starting by analyzing your donor database, who is already giving, and what kind of trends do we see through the giving patterns? Are there any patterns? Are people consistently giving the same exact amount? Well, let's reach out to them. Let's have a coffee with them, and let's kind of get to the bottom of that. How can we get a little bit more out of that gift? We spoke about identifying and asking volunteers to give. They're already committed to your organization. Your board members, if you're not having your board members give, that's a huge missed opportunity, as well as your staff. Staff are capable of giving, even if it's a small amount out of each paycheck. Over time, that's a significant impact. And it also shows that they're buying into your mission. They believe in it too. Another thing to keep in mind when we're identifying is talk to your staff. They're the ones on the ground that are interacting with, the individuals that are coming through the doors every day. Maybe they have somebody in mind, or maybe they have a specific relationship with somebody that you might be able, or they might be able, with a little training or coaching, be able to cultivate to a donor. I have a real life example of that from my previous experience working. My athletic director had a great relationship with this man, and he turned into a $100,000 donor. And then that gift is still continuing to grow and make an incredible impact on the organization. So that's just one small example. When you're identifying, easy ways to cultivate is just keep it simple, keep it consistent. Have a regular newsletter or mailing, a phone-a-thon, like those types of little things are all they need. Social media, just keep them engaged. Keep your donors updated on what's going on in the organization and what your goals are. And then from there, as you move them through to the solicitation phase, really, Kristi kind of talked on the segmentation, but you just have to ask. They're going to usually say yes. And if they say no, that's going to lead to maybe another opportunity, but we'll get to that in a minute. And then moving on to stewardship. Again, this is where we want to spend the most amount of time. So just keeping in contact. Don't just come at them once a year asking them for money. Keep that relationship going. Ask them to coffee. It's not your best friend, but it is. It's a sales. It's a game. It's sales. You're building a relationship. You are selling not a product, but you're selling your organization and an impact that you're making. In the chat, if everybody could please drop in one strategy that you are going to employ moving forward that you have liked or that sounds appealing from our webinar.
And as those answers come in, I'm going to answer a couple of these thoughtful questions. So Will asks, how mindful are you of restricted versus unrestricted gifts when it comes to giving levels? This is a great question, Will. And when you get the deck at the end of this, all of our sources that we cite are live linked, but the One Cause article has a great response to this regarding the ethical implications. And so the language that we choose is careful, right? Like $25 can provide things like a background check for a volunteer. And so just choosing your words very carefully there. And then obviously, if you know your donors well, which hopefully you do, your major donors, being mindful of what they typically give to, and always that personal conversation is best. But the article does address that. And then Ron asks, kind of shares something that is also sort of a question. I'm finding my biggest bottleneck in raising funds is the slowfulness between solicitation and decision. So underwriting, which I'm laughing. I definitely understand this challenge. I think whatever we can do, and one thing that nonprofits in general could improve upon is, and Sarah kind of said this, is not just to rest on our laurels of like doing what we've typically done in the typical calendar, but what can we do that creates urgency for the donor? So if we tie the need for the gift to an event, to something that's getting ready to happen, a service that cannot be delivered without their gift, right? There's with and without. With their gift, we can do this. Without their gift, this is what's at risk. This is what we stand to lose. So, and actually, we just talked about this by coincidence on our blog. How do you create that sense of urgency in a true and real, authentic way? So, and then I will pass it back over to Sarah as folks have named what strategy they would like to.
Yeah, and Kristi, real quick, to piggyback off of what you were saying for Ron, I would also emphasize, make it easy to give. I don't have checks. So if I have to mail in a check, like, you're not getting anything out of me. But if it's a quick link or a QR code that I can scan and just send money, like, easy, simple, done. Don't send me an invoice and ask me if I'm going to give, and then send me an invoice and said, oh, you said you're going to give, now mail it in. Like, that's going to sit on my counter. I'm going to go through it. And, maybe I don't know, got back from vacation. I'm like, oh, trash. You're pulling at my heartstrings with your letter. Here's my little link. I'm going to click it, and I'm going to give you money right now because I'm in a good mood. Okay. Let's talk about assessing and strengthening your fundraising mix, because it's not all about individual gifts. This is an example of kind of an at-a-glance development calendar. So as you see, you've got your red is solicitation, green is stewardship, blue is cultivation, and purple are the events. Stewardship and cultivation should be the most little boxes that you see on that screen. Events take time. Events take manpower, planning. It's hard to throw an event. And so that's why you see them kind of sprinkled out. And I know everybody has that board member on their board that gets super excited. And, the topic of conversation is, we need money. And so Marcia says, let's have a gala. Well, Marcia, take a look at our development calendar, please, because we already have a pancake breakfast, an auction, a golf outing, and a trivia night. So instead of just making Marcia feel shot down, this resource development calendar is at a glance, this is what we're already doing. Happy to talk about it, but something has to give. Also, it's great just kind of laying out, like, I love a good visual. So laying out, okay, it's January. What am I focusing on this month? And then what's in my pipeline? Like, what do I need to focus on? What's coming up next month and in that quarter? So it's a great visual to kind of break it down that way too. Activating your board and staff for revenue growth. And we kind of touched on this previously, but we're going to go into it a little more. We've talked about, yes, we want our board members to give, but they also have a huge network of people and friends that can also jump on board and give. So it's vital to have a case statement in your back pocket. It's simple. It's not your mission statement. A case statement is basically a shortened mission statement. All it is we specialize in, and we help. People's attention spans are super short. And so you only have about 15 seconds to share what you do, who you are, what you help, what you need, and how they can help. And so an example of this that I love is from the Community Foundation of Boone County. And their case statement is, we are the Community Foundation of Boone County. We specialize in connecting people, organizations, and philanthropy to create a thriving community for all. We help people make a difference, and we make it here. Boom, easy peasy, short, sweet, answers all of those questions. So if you don't have a case statement already, if your volunteers or board members don't, that's something you can easily set aside in your next board meeting or staff meeting. Take 10 minutes, write up a case statement, and memorize a couple sentences.
And I just want to say one more thing about this. I think a lot of the tools that we're getting ready to present in this section are also kind of no-brainers. But what we have found over the years is that, and Sarah said it differently about giving, I would say the same thing about your volunteers, is making things as easy as possible and as fun as possible. And so I speak all day, every day for a living, and I still like to be prepared. And so it's actually harder for me when I'm super passionate about something to be brief. So simple tools like this, and like we're getting ready to present, are simple on purpose. They're prompts to make it easy and make it fun for your volunteers. For those folks that don't like to talk, that are the opposite of me, this helps put them at ease and lets them know that they don't have to memorize, like Sarah said, a 9-page annual report. They don't have to have the world's most in-depth story if they're a new board member to the organization or staff member or volunteer. It's just very simple. So,
in addition to your case of support that you kind of want to have in your back pocket, making sure that you have a personal story. A lot of donors want to know, like, why do you care? Why is this mission important to you? So when you're thinking of your personal story, you want to keep in mind, like, what is your most significant personal experience with your organization? What personally motivates you to support the agency? And why do you care? Donor visits. I'm all for donor visits, because if you haven't been into a specific facility that you're supporting, or that, you know, you're receiving updates on, or you see on social media, and then you go there, it's way more impactful. And donors are going to most likely give more because they see firsthand the impact that you're making, or the impact that you have made. And they can also see, oh, this gym floor is about 45 years old. Like, maybe we can help you out there. So not only is it a great way to show donors and potential donors everything that you're doing, but also maybe opportunities to give a little more, make improvements. Some people get a little caught up when they have to make that ask, right? We've cultivated the relationship. Like, you are my pal, we get along, we both have, you know, alignment in this organization. But when it really comes down to making that ask, people kind of freeze, their palms get sweaty. But it's simple. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Basically, hey, Kristi, I'm calling to see if we can get together. I'd love to catch up, give you an update about our triple play program. Could you do coffee on June 1st or June 3rd? Let me know what works best for you. Looking forward to it. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything fancy at all. Short, sweet, simple, email, text, phone call. All right, cultivation. So we are working on just kind of getting to know our donor. How have you been involved with the organization? So these are just kind of questions, again, keep in your back pocket. When you're cultivating the donor, when you're taking them through your facility, giving them a tour, you're not making an ask. You're just getting to know them. You're learning about what they love about your organization, or things that they're passionate about. Maybe said donor, you learn just from asking these questions, is that they love kids, they love nature, and they love healthy meals, or making sure kids are full and fed. So asking these questions kind of get you more in tune on those types of preferences. How have you been involved with the organization? What was that experience like? Have you had the opportunity to meet with any of the people that we serve? And under what circumstances was that? And then what are your impressions? What do you think?
I will also just say that I always find this these set of questions really interesting because people will also reveal to you when they've had a bad experience. And so they reveal to you what they want their donor journey to look like and what they don't want it to look like. And, all of us, when something bad happens, an adverse experience, right, we remember that maybe even more sometimes than our good experiences. And so people will generally not be shy, in my experience, about teaching you how they want to be treated, what they want to learn, how they want to be involved, and to what extent. And so some of these questions, again, that seem super simple, are just key to your success in customizing what the journey looks like for the donor.
And continue to advocate. One no to an ask can lead to a yes for another. We all have time, talent, and treasure. So if they say no to your specific ask, okay, are they able to donate in-kind services or goods? Are they able to volunteer or to serve on a committee? Can they introduce us to someone who could at this time give or be a better fit? There's a lot of opportunities and a lot of potential there. And maybe it honestly just isn't a good time for them. Just because they said no, don't stop cultivating that relationship. And unless, it's a hard flat out no, which really doesn't happen often. Believe you can, and you are halfway there. And that is a quote that we love by Theodore Roosevelt. We also love this picture because the face on that young man says it all, right? Like tie ball game and he's on the line. So good luck, buddy.
So we had a lot, and I know Jenny will do some housekeeping things at the end, and we definitely want to take some questions, but we want you to think about, in just as we wrap up today, not just what ideas meant the most, but who in your organization is going to be your advocate to implement some of these small but mighty changes? Who also could be somebody that stands in the way of it? Who's going to object to some of these things? And how can you partner with someone in your organization to implement them and kind of overcome those objections? And then again, lots of different types of organizations are represented on the call. And we wanted to share examples from human services, from education, from environmental conservation. And we tried to do that, but we recognize that your case in your audience, your constituents are very different depending on what sort of niche you're in the nonprofit industry. So how can you take these examples, these templates, and right size them for your staff, for your mission, and make it work for you? And then these are those resources that I was talking about. So everything that we referenced is from a study, and they're all included here. Many of the questions that were asked are addressed in these resources here. And then, of course, Boardable has a long list of resources that we also love to use. We didn't shout all of those out because we're on the call with them today, but Jenny's going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'll pause before housekeeping and just see if there are any remaining questions, then I'll hand it back over to Jenny. Questions or even any comments if there are any left. And I want to say thanks to the audience for making our first ever LinkedIn Live fun and peaceful, smooth.
Yeah, no, it was super fun. A little delay on the chat, but lessons learned, like all good. This was amazing. Thank you, Kristi and Sarah, for spending the time with us, sharing so much great content. I feel like this is like such a master class on what every nonprofit should be thinking about. It's a really good chance to take a pause, revisit, what's your donor strategy, how you're going to execute that. Is there any last kind of words of wisdom, Kristi or Sarah, that you'd want to leave folks with, and anything specific? I'm always kind of coming at this with a little bit of a Boardable hat on. Anything specific around the board and just sort of like how the board might play into some of these strategies? I know we mentioned the board a few different times, but just kind of curious there. I think making it easy for them was one thing that really stands out for me.
Yeah, I think I'll say, and I know we can't interact as much with the audience, which I always love facilitation more than speaking, but we're definitely experiencing these are challenging times. Jenny acknowledged that at the open of the call. In challenging times, we can tend to have sort of a scarcity mindset, which we're kind of experiencing across the board. Boards are wanting more oversight, more insight into what the process is, into what we're doing. And so I guess, Jenny, as a final word of wisdom, I think that to the extent that you include your board in that Goldilocks amount, where it's not too much in the weeds and it's not too high, that is really important for this moment in time, to offer that transparency, to reassure them that action is taking place, that results are pending and they're on their way, that we're going to be okay, that we're working toward our goal, we're going to survive and weather this storm. I have personally been a fundraiser through 9/11, through the crash of 2008, through COVID, and now this. And this feels a lot more like 2008 to me than some of these other times as far as how folks are reacting. But letting them have their nose a little bit under the tent can be really helpful. Let them get involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like that communication, like that board communication, which is something, we do at Boardable and talk about a lot. And then also just like you said, being really clear of where you want them involved, how deep they can be helpful, all of those things, and kind of setting the framework. So you're not getting feedback maybe on the punctuation of your fundraising email, but you're getting feedback on strategy if that's what you want, and vice versa. If you're really looking for that final check of the fundraising email from a board member, like just being clear about that feels like a great approach. Thank you again. This was great. Learned a lot. Love always hearing from you and your team, Kristi. Sarah, thanks for joining. Great to have another voice in your real world experience as well. A couple of closing reminders, just an exclusive for attendees of the webinar, or if you're watching this on record or repeat, we're happy to honor this as well. But if you are interested in a demo of Boardable, feel like you have a need, want to leverage a board management platform, really want to engage your board at a next level, we'd love to give you a demo. We'll give you a $100 gift card for taking the time to do that. You can just simply drop your email. We'll make sure you get that information. Or if you need to reach out for any reason, feel free to reach out to me. It's just Jenny, Jen&I at boardable.com, and I can get you routed the right way. We have a new ebook as well, The Resilient Nonprofit. We've talked a lot about fundraising strategies and resiliency. We'd love for you to download this. You can download it at boardable.com. And really, that's all I have. Thank you so much, guys. This was really fun. Thanks for making our first LinkedIn Live a success. We plan to try these in smaller formats, shorter formats, Q&A only, a lot of different things as we kind of dig deeper in sort of the nonprofit LinkedIn community. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful afternoon.